I've watched agentic get attached to things that were straightforwardly an Anyten, simple automation in Anyten or Zapier, okay, with language models in the middle, which might be exactly the right thing for you, but it should be priced like a Zapier or Anyten automation with a language model in the middle and not an AI agent. So I've got a sentence here from a real AI agency proposal. Consultants I know was quoted $11,000 for this exact line you see here. We'll deploy a RAG pipeline with MCP integrations and human in the loop guardrails fine-tuned on your business data. And she also went ahead and signed it. And here's the thing, that might have been a fair price for something genuinely useful, or it might also have been a very expensive way to do something she could have probably set up herself in one afternoon. But she had no way to tell because she didn't know what any of those words meant, and she also didn't want to ask. And I'm sure they had like several calls and discovery sessions just before they handed her over the proposal. So maybe it would make sense. That's the actual problem though, that AI is complicated and that it has a lot of vocabulary, and that vocabulary is doing a job, and the job is probably making you feel unqualified to ask about prices you're quoted by an AI agency. So today I am defining 30 AI terms in plain English, and by definitions on their own, I know they don't help you make a decision. So I'm going to be doing one more thing. For every single term I mention, I'm going to tell you what bucket it goes in, whether you need it now, whether it's worth knowing, or you can actually ignore it completely. So let's get right into it. Part 1, this is the words you probably hear in every pitch. Artificial intelligence or AI, and I'm sure this is everywhere, you probably already know it, but it's an umbrella term for the system doing something you would normally ask a person to do for you. So let's say something like a spam filter, it's AI. A chess program is AI. ChatGPT is AI. It's been called that since the 1950s. So this isn't something new, which is exactly why it's really a useless spec. When a tool tells you it's AI powered, you have learned nothing from the tool. It could be a language model doing real work, or it could be an if this then that rule someone wrote in 2011 with a new sticker on top of it. So my verdict here is that if you are walking into a meeting, you have a proposal, someone is saying it's AI powered and all that, just ignore that AI powered phrase. Not because AI is not real, but because the word on its own tells you nothing, okay? If a vendor says it's AI powered, and I actually realize a lot of people watching me are not subscribed to my channel. So subscribing to my channel is actually one of the best and surprisingly free ways you can actually help my channel grow so that I can reach more people. So if you're not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, turn on your notification bell so that I get notified anytime I post videos. Stops there. Your next question to the vendor should be, which part of this tool is AI powered? What exactly is it doing that makes it qualify as AI powered? Now, the next word I want to touch on is large language models, or LLMs. So this is the thing underneath ChatGPT and Claude. And what it does mechanically is to predict the next chunk of text. That's it. So you give it words, it predicts what comes next over and over, very fast, with an enormous amount of pattern learned from an enormous amount of writing. And that sounds too simple to be useful, and I understand the reaction, but predicts the next words extremely well turns out to cover a writing proposal, summarizing a call, and drafting a follow-up, because all of those are just producing sensible text given a situation. So my verdict here when it comes to knowing about LLMs is that it's worth knowing, and keep it in your head because it explains every limitation coming up. And it's not looking things up, it's not thinking about your business, it's just predicting. Now, the model versus the app, because a lot of people confuse this a lot, and confusing this can cost you a lot of money. So GPT is a model. If you go into ChatGPT, you'll be able to select models. So GPT is a model, but ChatGPT itself is the app you use the model in. With Claude, if you go into Claude, there's models like Sonnet, Opus, Haiku. Recently, Claude just released Fable 5. All those are models, okay? Claude is the app. Gemini is very annoying because, like, some of their models are also Gemini, so it's annoyingly both. But then just know that there's a difference between what's the model and what's the app. So now, why should you really care about both? Because when someone tells you they built a custom AI platform, a custom application, or a custom AI workflow, you can now ask them which model is it running, and 9 times out of 10 is just the same model you already have access to for $20 a month wrapped in their interface. Now, sometimes that wrapper is genuinely worth paying for, and I don't want to discount anyone's technical strengths. They probably done the setup work for you don't want to do, and that's a real service they're offering. But you should know that's not what you're buying. Okay, the wrapper is what you're buying, not the intelligence, because the models are already there for you. So my verdict here is that, again, this is worth knowing because it's the fastest way for you to tell whether you are buying something real or not. Now, the next word I want to touch on is tokens. So tokens are how AI gets chopped up and counted. So I'm not saying words, I'm talking about chunks. So if you take the word onboarding, for instance, it might be 2 tokens, onboard and in, right? The rough rule for English is about the quarters of a word per token. So 1,000 tokens is around 750 words, if you want me to put it that way. And you need this one because tokens are the unit you pay in. Every AI price you'd ever see is per million tokens with input and output price separately. Now, the next word I actually want to touch on is context window. Now, the context window is how much the model can actually hold in its mind at once, okay? So your instructions, the conversation so far, and any document you've actually given it measured in tokens. So think of it as the desk, right? Not the filing cabinet. Everything it can see has to be on the desk right now. And when the desk is full, the oldest thing actually slide off the edge, right? And so this is why a long conversation you probably started in Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini actually starts forgetting what you actually told it at the beginning. It's not that it's being lazy. Sometimes people say Claude has these models are becoming lazy and all that. That part is genuinely off the desk. And the first is not to repeat yourself louder. It's actually better to start a fresh conversation at pasting what actually matters so that you get the best out of it. So my verdict here is you definitely need it now. This explains more day-to-day AI frustration than anything else in this video. Now, the next word I want to touch on is hallucination. So a hallucination is when a model starts saying something false confidently in a completely normal tone, and it happens a lot of the time. And you already know why, because we did large language models, right? We talked about the fact that large language models are basically just predicting plausible next words, and a plausible sounding statistic is exactly as easy to produce as a true one. There's no internal alarm that actually goes off. And practically for you, it would actually invent, let's say, a citation, a price, a legal detail, or a client report, and will look exactly like the correct answer. That's the whole problem. And so here's the rule I use. I would suggest you actually steal it. AI can actually prepare a lot of things for you, but you need to verify anything with a number, a date, a promise, okay? So my verdict here is if it's definitely something you need now, it's non-negotiable. Now let's move on to part 2, which is basically getting the output you actually use. And the first word I want to talk about here is prompt, okay? A prompt is just what you type. That's the whole definition. It's got a fancy name because people started studying which ones actually work, and they call it prompt engineering. But you need it because of what most people get wrong. They type a request the way they would have typed it in Google search. Like if you go into Google search, you can type 4 words and then you get a response. But if you do the same thing, like you go into Claude and you say, write a client onboarding email, you'll be disappointed by what you get, okay? So what actually works is boring. You basically need to give it a context, okay? Just like you would have a new hire and then you give them context about their work. So my verdict with this is that you definitely need it now. So it's something you need to pay more attention to. The next term I want to talk about is system prompt. So a system prompt is more so like the standing instruction that sits above the whole conversation. So in the apps, you'd see it called that custom instructions or project instructions, or maybe a Claude project or ChatGPT project. All these projects would have the ability for you to provide it with instructions. And this is the difference between the tool being just a slot machine and it being very useful. Right now, most people re-explain their entire business every single time they open a new chat. Instead, you can actually write it once. This is what my business does, and the AI will be able to guide you without assuming, and it applies to everything after that. So my verdict with this is that you definitely need it now. Honestly, if you do one single thing from this video, make it be this one. Half an hour to set up and you don't have to think about it anymore. The next thing I want to touch on is few shot prompting. Few shot just means showing examples before you make the request, and zero shot is instructions only. So instead of write me a proposal, you do something like, here are 2 proposals I've sent in the past that won't work. Write a third one for this client. Same 2 completely different outputs because you've shown it the target, the goal, how you want it to look like instead of just describing it. So my verdict here is it's definitely worth knowing and worth doing. If you have 3 good examples of anything you write regularly, you already have most of the working system. Now, the next AI term I want to touch on is chain of thought. So chain of thought is asking the model to work through steps instead of jumping an answer. So you see it as thinking step by step or show your reasoning. Genuinely improves accuracy on anything with logic in it. Pricing, scheduling, working out whether the lead is a fit or not. And there's a second benefit for you specifically when you can see the steps. You can see where it went wrong, and if it just hands you a number, you can actually go and debug yourself. My verdict here is that it's definitely worth knowing. Now, I want to talk about reasoning model. So a reasoning model is the one that's been trained to do step-by-step work by default and to spend longer on harder problems. Practically, it's slower, it costs more, it's better at things that have a right answer. It's worth it if you are using it to analyze your numbers or working through a messy decision. It's really not worth it for drafting a social post. You'd wait longer for something that isn't better. So my verdict here is it's definitely worth knowing, mainly so you stop using the expensive slow one for every single thing you do. Now, the next AI term is temperature. So temperature is a setting for how random the output is. So low is predictable and repeatable, high is creative and occasionally unhinged. So my verdict here is really shouldn't care. Ignore it, because in the apps you already use, ChatGPT and all that, sometimes they are not exposed and the default is fine. And if a vendor is talking to you about tuning temperature as part of what you're paying for, that's a very small dial being presented to you as engineering. Now, my next AI term, which I think is important, is multimodal. So multimodal basically means that it handles more than text. So images, audios, videos, PDFs. And I actually did a video recently on things Gemini can do, because one model can basically do more than text, okay? And so if you're interested in watching that video, I'm actually going to link it in this particular video as well. The reason why this actually matters for a service business is unglamorous and genuinely useful. You can hand it a screenshot, a photo of a whiteboard, a scanned intake form, or even a recording of a call instead of having to type all of that first. And a lot of admin you've probably been avoiding is avoidable because of this. And most people don't realize it's already available in the tool they're already paying for. The example is Gemini, like I talked about earlier on. So my verdict about this is definitely worth knowing so that you know what type of models to use for what kind of job you need to do. Now, quick thing, and then we can keep going. I've put all 30 of these words or terms inside a PDF. I'm going to drop that in my school community. So if you are not part of my school community, it's actually free to join. You can join my school community so that you can get access to this. I'm going to leave the link to my school community in the comment section so that you can join. Let's talk about part 3, making AI know your business. I want you to pay close attention to the difference between 2 of these that I'm going to talk about, because that difference is where the overcharging happens. The first word is training. So training is the process that actually creates the model in the first place, showing it an enormous amount of text and adjusting billions of internal settings until it's able to actually predict well. I'm talking about trillions of words, tens of millions of dollars, and only a handful of companies on earth can actually do this from scratch, okay? So my verdict here is ignore it, unless of course you want to be a machine learning engineer, with one thing to hold on to. Nobody is training your own specific model for you. I mean, this can be true if you are a large enterprise, but if you're a small business owner, then when you hear trained on your data, that is almost never like model training. This brings me to the one that is closer to the one I really want you to hear, which is fine-tuning. So let's talk about that. So fine-tuning is taking a finished model and training it further on a narrower set of examples so that it behaves in a particular way. So people would take Kimi, for instance, and fine-tune it, okay? It's real and it has real use cases. And I'm going to say the unpopular thing out loud. You almost certainly do not need it if you're a small business owner. So if someone is quoting you thousands of dollars to fine tune a model on your business, the honest question is whether a well-written system prompt and a folder of your own documents gets you 90% of the same results for close to nothing. And for a service business, in my experience, it usually does. And here's the specific confusion that gets old, okay? Fine-tuning changes style and format. It's not how you make AI know facts about your business. That's the next step. And those two things, they get blurred together in proposals constantly, and that blur is very expensive. So my verdict here is this is something you can ignore. Again, unless you want to be a machine learning engineer and you care about this, and treat it as just a price flag, not a scam, just very often the wrong tool sold at the right margin. This brings me to RAG, and I have lots of videos on this channel talking about RAG. But RAG simply means retrieval augmented generation, which is a terrible term for a simple idea. So before answering, the system goes and fetches the relevant documents and answers using those. That's it. That's the whole thing. It's the difference between asking a new employee about a refund policy from memory versus letting them open the policy documents first. And this is what people actually want when they say want an AI that actually knows my business. They don't necessarily mean fine tuning. That's so expensive. This is exactly what they need. So my verdict here is that it's definitely worth knowing because now you can translate. You can actually translate it. When a proposal says RAG, it simply just means we'll let it read your documents before it answers. And sometimes that's a real build with real work in it into a project, and sometimes it's just uploading 11 files into a project inside ChatGPT, which you can actually do yourself for 4 minutes. And most importantly, I do have lots of tutorials as well that cover this as well. Now, the next word I want to touch on is embeddings and vector database. So these two are plumbings underneath RAG. So an embedding turns a chunk of text into a list of numbers that represent its meaning, so that refund and money back end up near each other even though they share no letters. And basically a vector database is where those numbers get stored so they can be searched by meaning instead of by the exact word. It's genuinely clever and you do not necessarily need it. So my verdict here is ignore both of them. The only reason to know the words is so that when they show up in a proposal, you can actually recognize them as an implementation detail rather than as the thing you're actually buying. Now, the next word I want to touch on, or two words I want to touch on, is knowledge base or project knowledge. So this is a version of RAG that's already sitting inside tools you already use, like a cloud project, a ChatGPT project, a custom GPT, in some cases a gem, right? You upload your documents and then the assistant refers to them. And you need this one because it's the highest value thing most business owners haven't set up yet. Your service descriptions, your pricing, your standard contract, your tone guide, your three best proposals, your FAQs. Once that's in there, you stop explaining your own business to your computer every single morning. So my verdict with this word is like it's something you definitely need now. This and system prompts together are the most of what people are paying agencies to build for them right now. Now, the next word I want to touch on is grounding, okay? So grounding basically means the answer is tied to a real checkable source rather than the model's memory. And in practice, it looks like a citation or a link or the actual line quoted from your document. Why it matters to you is what makes checking possible. So an ungrounded answer, you have to verify from scratch all the time, but a grounded one you can spot check in 10 seconds. Okay, so my verdict with this is definitely worth knowing. And if you are comparing AI tools, always ask, can you show me where this actually came from? So let's move on to part 4, automation versus AI agents, because this is the most expensive section to actually get on. So let's start with workflow automation. So workflow automation is a fixed sequence that you define, okay? So when this happens, do that and that and that. Same steps every time in the order. A form gets submitted, for instance, so a folder gets created, a welcome email goes out, and a task appears in your project too. You decide all of that in advance, so nothing is decided for you. So my verdict with this definitely is something you need now. And here's my honest bias. This is what a lot of business owners actually need now because it's cheaper, it's predictable. And when it breaks, you can exactly see what's happening. And I do have lots of tutorials, different use cases on automation on this channel. So if you're interested in that, I'm actually going to link them somewhere in this video so that you can go check them out. The next AI term is trigger. So a trigger is the event that actually starts automation. So a form submission, a new email, a payment, a calendar booking, or just a time. That is, let's say, Monday at 9 all the time. Okay. So my verdict is you definitely need it now because it's the real starting point for any of your business automations. And the useful exercise isn't really where could I use AI, it's more so what happens in my week that always needs to something or something else happening or leads to the same 3 tasks. Okay, that's the trigger, and everything after it is automatable. Now the next word is API, and on this channel I've been throwing around the word API all the time, but an API is how two pieces of software actually talk to each other directly without a person copying and pasting between them. I mean, if you want to be a human API, right, copy from Notion, paste in ChatGPT, then you can be, but there's an API to do that. And so an API is all you need. So when someone asks whether a tool has an API, they're just asking whether it can be connected to your other tools. And when a tool doesn't have one or it hides behind an enterprise plan, that's a real constraint on you. And it's worth you knowing before you actually commit your business to it. So my verdict with this is definitely worth knowing. Now let's talk about a webhook. Webhook is a message one app sends to another the moment something happens. So instead of a second app checking it over and over again. So my verdict again with this one is, unless you want to be a developer, you care about all these things, you can actually safely ignore it for now. You would encounter it as a box you actually paste a URL into, and the tool will tell you exactly what to paste. And that is the entire relationship you would ever have with a webhook as a business owner. The next word I want to talk about is no code and low code, because these also get thrown around a lot. So no code simply means you build by dragging, you're clicking and filling in boxes instead of writing code. And low code means mostly that, with the occasional small snippets here and there. You need this term because it's your filter. When you're looking at building something or vibe coding something, you can typically ask, is there a no code way to do this? Right? This is the question that will decide whether this is actually a weekend project or something you'd actually need a developer for 6 weeks. And the honest limit, because I'm not going to actually pretend, is no code is not effortless because you're still building and you still have to maintain it after that. Okay, so there'll be times where things would not work. It will definitely remove the coding, the syntax and all that, but it does not remove your thinking. So my verdict for sure is you need it now, just because vibe coding is a thing and you can self-serve and build some of these things on your own. Now, the other words I want to touch on is tool use, function calling. So tool use, sometimes it's also called function calling, is when the model stops writing text and instead uses something external. So let's say a calculator or a search or your calendar or your CRM, right? This matters because it's a line between talking and doing. A model with no tools can write you a very lovely follow-up email, but a model with tool can actually look up when you last spoke to that person and check your calendar and put the draft in your outbox. So my verdict with this is, it's definitely worth knowing when you're assessing an AI tool, what can it actually touch? Is that question that actually separates a chat window from a system. Now, the next word I want to talk about is MCP, which is Model Context Protocol. And I have a video on this on my channel. I'm going to link it here. But MCP is basically a shared understanding or a shared standard for plugging in AI into your tool. So instead of, let's say, a custom integration built separately for every single app that you own, there's one common way for you to connect. So just think of it like the USB Type-C for AI connections. Before, every device needed its own cable, but now we have USB Type-C, right? So you can, any device that has that same standard, you can actually plug it in. So verdict here is definitely worth knowing because it's actually changing what's realistic for you, which is connecting AI to your email, your drive, your calendar. It used to be a developer's job, but now it's becoming just a simple toggle you switch on. Isn't that amazing, guys? So if you hear MCP in a sales call, the fair question you should be asking is this a connector I could turn on myself? Okay, now let's talk about AI agent, because I hear this a lot. So an AI agent is just a system that's given a goal instead of a sequence, and it works out the steps itself using tools in a loop. So try something, look at the result, decide what's next. And the distinction is usually just one line. Automation will typically follow your own instructions, and AI agent will make decisions on its own, which can be very dangerous, okay, because you don't know what kind of decisions it's going to make. So my verdict here is that it's actually worth knowing. And here's my genuine position about this. When people come to me like, build me an AI agent, set this up for me, and this position I have is not going to be popular. Most small business owners don't really need an AI agent, because AI agents are harder to build, they're more expensive to run, they're harder to debug, and they're less profitable. Because the exact thing that makes them powerful is that you didn't decide the steps, which is also what makes them very even when they're touching your clients. So use an AI agent when the path is genuinely something that cannot be known in advance, and use an automation when it can. Most of your week can actually be known in advance, especially if you're a small business. Now let's talk about agentic. So agentic is just the adjective, okay? Agentic workflow, agentic AI, agentic platform. My verdict here is just ignore it, okay? And I would go further. Treat it as a pricing signal. I have watched agentic get attached to things that were straightforwardly an N10, simple automation in N10 or Zapier, okay? With language models in the middle, which might be exactly the right thing for you, but it should be priced like a Zapier or N10 automation with a language model in the middle and not an AI agent. So when you hear it, just ask one question. What decision is this making that I didn't specify? If there's a clear answer, then great. If the answer gets vague, it's a fixed sequence with a nicer name. Now let's talk about multi-agent and orchestration. So multi-agents simply means several specialized agents working on one goal. So you can have a researcher, a writer, a reviewer, and orchestration is a layer deciding which one goes when. Effectively, think of it like a project manager for your AI agents, and Claude has agent teams. OpenClaw lets you have multiple agents. I have tutorials on this channel for that. I'll link them here in the video. So my honest verdict here is ignore this for now. Don't get me wrong, it's real, and it's also genuinely where the interesting work is happening right now. It's also where things break in ways that take a long time to find, and every extra agent is another place your outputs can actually go quietly wrong. So if you're a 5-person business being sold a multi-agent system, I would want to hear very specifically what one agent couldn't do. Now let's talk about human in the loop, because human in the loop is something I touch on a lot on this channel. It simply means a person reviews or approves before something completes. So the AI drafts, you approve, and then it goes ahead and sends. My verdict here is that it's something you need now, and I would argue this is the most important thing in this entire video for anyone running a business in relationships. Here's the belief I keep coming back to, okay? AI should always prepare for you, but humans should communicate on your behalf. The draft, the summary, the research, the first version of the report. Let's do all of that. Is good at it and it does it really well. But a moment before something reaches a client, that's your responsibility. Not because AI is bad at writing, because your client is buying your judgment, and a mistake at a specific moment costs you more than every hour you saved in getting there. So practically, whatever you build, make sure you put in an approval step in front of anything that leaves your business every single time. Don't put any exceptions on this. So the count is here. That's 30. Okay, let's add it up. 10 you need right now, which is tokens, context windows, hallucinations, prompts, system prompts, knowledge base, workflow automation, trigger, no code, human in the loop. Now look at that list and notice what's not on it. There's nothing like AI agent, there's nothing like RAG or fine tuning, no MCP. Every single one of those 10 is either about how the tool works, or about setting it up properly, or about letting it embarrass you in front of a client. Not one of them requires anybody to build you anything. Now, 12 are worth knowing, and they are mostly so you can actually read a proposal without nodding. And 8 you can completely ignore, one of which is fine-tuning, which I mentioned in the beginning of this video, and it's probably the most expensive line item regularly quoted to businesses that don't need it. One more thing before I go, because this is the practical use of everything we just did. 4 phrases and questions to ask when you hear them. If you hear something as AI powered, always ask which part, what is it doing? If they say custom trained on your data, just always ask, do you mean fine-tuned, or do you mean it can read our documents? Because those are very different price tags. If they say fully autonomous, always ask, where's the approval step? If there isn't one, the decision somebody made and it's not a feature. If they say it's seamless integration, just ask, is this through an API, is this through a connector, or is it through a person copying and pasting? Because you don't want to be a human API. All 3 of these get called seamlessly, okay? None of these actually prove anybody's being dishonest. Plenty of good people use loose language all the time. But a vendor who can actually answer all four of those clearly is very different from a vendor who can't. So, and like I said, my school community would be in the link, so you can also join my school community. It's free. But as usual, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.